They came at length to a garden called Gethsemane. Jesus told them, "Pray for yourselves that you will not sink into temptation. I'm going over there to pray." Then he took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee with him, and as they left the larger group behind, he grew filled with sorrow and deeply distressed. Jesus said to them, "My heart is so heavy, I feel as if I could die. Wait here for me and stay awake to keep watch." He walked a little farther and threw himself on the ground and prayed for deliverance from what was to come. "Abba, Father, I know that anything is possible for you, but this is the last thing I want. If there is any way, please take this cup away so I don't have to drink from it. But whatever happens, let your will be done, not mine." Then a messenger from heaven appeared to strengthen him, and in his anguish he prayed even more intensely, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. He got up, went back to the 3, and found them asleep, weighed down with sorrow. Jesus woke Peter and said, "Are you sleeping? Couldn't you wait with me for just an hour? Stay awake and pray that you aren't led into a trial of your own. It's true, even when the spirit is willing, the body can betray it. With that, Jesus returned to his secluded spot to pray the same prayer again, pleading with God but surrendering to his will. Jesus prayed, "Father, if there is no other way for this cup to pass without my drinking it, then not my will, but yours be done." Again, Jesus returned to his disciples and found them asleep. And when he woke them, they didn't know what to say to him. So Jesus left them again and returned to prayer, praying the same sentiments with the same words. Again, he returned to his disciples and said, "Well, are you still sleeping? That's enough rest. Now the time has come. The Son of Man is just about to be given over to the betrayers and the sinners." Judas Iscariot, who had already set his betrayal in motion and knew that Jesus often met with the disciples in this olive grove, entered the garden with an entourage of Roman soldiers and officials sent by the chief priests and Pharisees. They brandished their weapons under the light of torches and lamps. Jesus stepped forward. "Whom are you looking for?" The soldiers replied, "Jesus the Nazarene." Jesus said, "I am the one. If you're looking for me, then let these men go free." This happened to fulfill the promise he made that none of those entrusted to him will be lost. Suddenly, Peter lunged toward one of the high priest's servants, and with his sword, Peter severed the man's right ear. Jesus said to Peter, "Put down your sword and return it to the sheath. Am I to turn away from the cup the Father has given me to drink?"
They led Jesus off to see Caiaphas, the high priest, who had gathered a council of religious and civic leaders, scribes, chief priests, and elders to hear the evidence and render some decision regarding Jesus. Peter followed all the way into the courtyard of the high priest, though at a safe distance so as not to be seen. He sat down with the guards to warm himself at their fire to see how things would unfold, hoping that no one would notice him. The chief priests and other religious leaders called for witnesses against Jesus so they could execute him. But things didn't turn out the way they had planned. There were plenty of people willing to get up and lie about Jesus, distorting what he had said or done. But their testimonies disagreed with each other, and the leaders were left with nothing. Finally, two men stood up and said, "Look, he said, I can destroy God's temple and rebuild it in 3 days. But even here, the witnesses could not agree on exactly what Jesus had said. Then Caiaphas the high priest stood up and addressed Jesus. "Do you have anything to say in your own defense? What do you think of what all these people have said about you?" Jesus remained silent and didn't say a word. Caiaphas then said to Jesus, "Under a sacred oath before the living God, tell us plainly, are you the anointed one, the liberating king, the Son of God?" Jesus replied, "So you seem to be saying. I will say this, beginning now you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of God's power and glory and coming on heavenly clouds." The high priest tore his robes and screeched, "Blasphemy! We don't need any more witnesses. We've all just witnessed this most grievous blasphemy right here and now. So, gentlemen, what's your verdict?" Their verdict was unanimous. Jesus was guilty of a capital crime. So the people began to humiliate him. They spat in his face and hit him. Then he was blindfolded, and some of them smacked him, slapped him across the cheeks and jeered, saying, "Well, anointed one, prophesy for us if you can. Who hit you? And who is about to hit you next?" As all this was going on in Caiaphas's chamber, Peter was still waiting by the fire outside in the courtyard with some servants. One of the servant girls came up to him and said, "You were one of those men with Jesus of Nazareth, weren't you?" Just as Jesus had predicted, Peter denied it before everyone. "Not me. I don't know what you're talking about." Peter went out to stand by the gate. As he walked past, another servant girl recognised him. "This fellow here was with Jesus. I recognise him." Again, just as Jesus had predicted, Peter denied it. "I don't know him." Peter then went to chat with a few of the servants. An hour or so later, some other servants approached him. "Look, we know that you must be one of Jesus' followers. You speak like you're from the same area as his followers. You've got that telltale Galilean accent." Then Peter swore an oath that if he wasn't telling the truth, he would be cursed, and said, "Listen, I don't even know the man you're talking about." He hadn't even finished the sentence when a nearby rooster crowed. Jesus turned toward Peter, and their eyes met. Peter remembered Jesus' words about his triple denial before the rooster would crow, and he left the courtyard, sat down on the ground, and wept bitter tears.
As we contemplate some of those dry, empty, and painful places, let's join in singing Desert Song.
When morning came, the chief priests bound Jesus, led him away, and turned him over to the Roman governor, Pilate. The Jewish leaders would not enter the palace because their presence in a Roman office would defile them and cause them to miss the Passover feast. Pilate, the governor, met them outside. Pilate asked, "What charges do you bring against this man?" The chief priests and officials replied, "If he weren't a lawbreaker, we wouldn't have brought him to you." Pilate said, "Then judge him yourselves by your own law." But the religious leaders told him, "Our authority does not allow us to give him the death penalty." The chief priests and the elders then stood and poured out their accusations that Jesus was a traitor, a seditious rebel, a would-be saviour, and a would-be king. Jesus stood in the stream of accusations, but he did not respond. Pilate turned to Jesus and asked, "Do you have anything to say? How do you respond to all these charges that have been made against you?" Still, Jesus said nothing, which Pilate found rather astounding. No protests, no defence, nothing. Pilate re-entered the governor's palace and called for Jesus to follow him. Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "Are you asking me because you believe this is true, or have others said this about me?" Pilate said, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your people, including the chief priests, have arrested you and placed you in my custody. What have you done?" Jesus told him, "My kingdom is not recognized in this world. If this were my kingdom, my servants would be fighting for my freedom. But my kingdom is not in this physical realm." Pilate then asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus replied, "You say that I am a king. For this I have been born, and for this I have come into the cosmos, to demonstrate the power of truth. Everyone who seeks truth hears my voice." And Pilate said, "What is truth?" Then Pilate left Jesus to go and speak to the Jewish people. Pilate called out to the chief priest and crowd, "I find this man guilty of no crime." The religious leaders, growing more intense, protested, "He has been stirring up discontent among the people all over Judea. He started up in Galilee, and now he's brought his band of trouble all the way to Jerusalem." Pilate paused and said, "Just a minute. Is this man a Galilean?" And when he learned that Jesus was indeed Galilean, which meant he was officially under King Herod's jurisdiction, Pilate sent him over to Herod, who was currently in Jerusalem. Herod was fascinated to meet Jesus, for he had heard about him for a long time. He was hoping he might be treated to a miracle or two. He interrogated Jesus for quite a while, but Jesus remained silent, refusing to answer his questions. Meanwhile, the chief priests and religious scholars had plenty to say, angrily hurling accusations at Jesus. Eventually, Herod and his soldiers began to insult Jesus, mocking and degrading him. They put expensive clothing on him and sent him back to Pilate. This ended a long-standing rift between Herod and Pilate. They became friends from that day forward.
Pilate assembled the chief priests and other Jewish authorities and said, "You presented this man to me as a rabble-rouser, but I examined him in your presence and found him not guilty of the charges you have levelled against him. Herod also examined him and released him into my custody, so he hasn't done anything deserving the death penalty. I'll see to it that he is properly whipped and then let him go." He knew that the chief priests had delivered Jesus because they were threatened by him, not because Jesus was a criminal. Now the governor had a custom. During the Passover festival, Pilate would release one prisoner from custody, whomever the people most desired. There was one rebel from those imprisoned for insurrection against the Roman occupation. He had committed murder during an uprising, and his name was Barabbas. A crowd had gathered in front of Pilate's judgment seat to request that Pilate follow his usual custom, and Pilate offered them a choice. "Whom do you want me to free, Barabbas or Jesus, whom some call the Anointed One?" As Pilate sat down in his judgment seat and waited for them to respond, he received a message from his wife. "Distance yourself utterly from the proceedings against this righteous man. I have had a dream about him, a dream full of twisted sufferings. He is innocent, I know it, and we should have nothing to do with him." But the chief priests and elders moved among the crowd and persuaded them to call for Barabbas instead. Pilate asked the crowd, "Which of these men would you have me free?" The crowd shouted, "Barabbas!" Pilate responded, "Then what do you want me to do with the King of the Jews?" The crowd grew even louder, "Crucify him!" Pilate asked them, "Why? What crime has this man committed to deserve such a sentence? What has he done that is so evil? I have found in him no offence worthy of capital punishment. As I said, I will punish him and then release him." But the crowd would not relent. They shouted louder and louder that he should be crucified. Pilate saw that unless he wanted a riot on his hands, he now had to bow to their wishes and could not persuade them to change their mind. So he took a pitcher of water, stood before the crowd, washed his hands, and said, "This man's blood will be upon you and not upon me. I wash myself of it." The crowd yelled, "Indeed, let his blood be upon us and our children." So Pilate released Barabbas to them and had Jesus publicly whipped, which was the normal prelude to crucifixion. Then he had Jesus led away to be crucified. The governor's soldiers took Jesus into a great hall, and the rest of the soldiers in the detachment gathered there, hundreds of them. They stripped Jesus of his clothes, draping him in a bold scarlet cloak, the kind that soldiers sometimes wore. They gathered some thorny vines, wove them into a crown, and perched that crown upon his head. They stuck a reed in his right hand, and then they knelt before him and cried out in a mock salute, "Hail, the King of the Jews!" They spat on him and hit him on the head with his sceptre of reeds, and when they had their fill, they pulled off the bold scarlet cloak, dressed him in his own simple clothes, and led him off to be crucified.
God, we open our hearts to you. We ask that you would fill them with fresh humility and awe as we contemplate the depth of your love for us demonstrated at the cross.
How deep the Father's love for us, how vast beyond all measure, that He should give His only Son to make a wretched treasure. How great the pain of searing loss! The Father turns His face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my sin upon His shoulders. Ashamed, I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held Him there until it was accomplished. His dying breath hath brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything, no gifts, no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. What should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer. On this I know with all my heart, His wounds have paid my ransom.
On the way to the place of crucifixion, they pulled a man from the crowd. His name was Simon of Cyrene, a person from the countryside who happened to be entering the city at that moment. They put Jesus' cross on Simon's shoulders, and he followed behind Jesus. Along with him was a huge crowd of common people, including many women shrieking and wailing in grief. Jesus wasn't the only one being crucified that day. There were two others, criminals, who were also being led to their execution. Eventually they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. There they gave him a drink, wine mixed with bitter herbs to dull his pain, but Jesus refused to drink it. As Jesus was being crucified, the soldiers tore his outer garments into 4 pieces, one for each of them. They wanted to do the same with his tunic, but it was seamless, one piece of fabric woven from the top down. So they said, "Don't tear it, let's cast lots, and the winner will take the whole thing." This happened in keeping with the Hebrew scriptures, which said, "They divided my outer garments and cast lots for my clothes." These soldiers did exactly what was foretold in the Hebrew scriptures. Jesus called out, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." His crucifixion began about 9 o'clock in the morning. Over his head hung a sign that indicated the charge for which he was being crucified. It read, "The King of the Jews." Because the site was near an urban region, it was written in 3 languages, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, so that all could understand. The chief priests had said to Pilate, "Don't write the King of the Jews, write, 'He said, I am the King of the Jews.'" But Pilate said, "I've written what I have written." Jesus' mother was standing next to his cross along with her sister Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Jesus looked to see his mother and the disciple he loved standing nearby, and he said to Mary, his mother, "Dear woman, this is your son." Then motioning to John, Jesus said, "This is now your mother." People passing by shouted curses and blasphemies at Jesus. They wagged their heads at him and hissed, "So you're the one who was going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days? Well, if you're so powerful, then why don't you rescue yourself? Come on down from that cross." The chief priests, scribes, and elders also mocked Jesus. He saved others, but he can't save himself. If he's really the king of Israel, then let him climb down from the cross, then we'll believe him. He claimed he was one with God. Well, let God save him if he's God's beloved son. One of the criminals joined in the cruel talk. "You're supposed to be the anointed one, right? We'll do it. Rescue yourself and us." But the other criminal told him to be quiet. "Don't you have any fear of God at all? You're getting the same death sentence he is. We're getting what we deserve since we've committed crimes, but this man hasn't done anything wrong at all." Then he turned to Jesus and said, "Jesus, when you come into your kingdom, please remember me." Jesus replied, "I promise you that this very day you will be with me in paradise." Starting at noon, the entire land became dark. It was dark for 3 hours. In the middle of the dark afternoon, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Some of those standing nearby misunderstood him and said, "He's calling on Elijah. Let's see if he comes to rescue him." Jesus knew now that his work had been accomplished and the Hebrew scriptures were being fulfilled, and said, "I'm thirsty." A jar of sour wine had been left there, so they took a hyssop branch with a sponge soaked in the vinegar and put it to his mouth. When Jesus drank, he spoke, "It is finished." At around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Jesus cried out once more, loudly saying, "Father, I entrust my spirit into your hands." And then he breathed his last breath. His head fell and he gave up the spirit. At that instant, the temple curtain was torn in half from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split in two, tombs burst open, and the bodies of many sleeping holy women and men were raised up. The Roman centurion, the soldier in charge of the executions, stood in front of Jesus and saw the manner of his death, said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." A number of women who'd been devoted to Jesus and followed him from Galilee were present too, watching from a distance. Mary Magdalene was there, and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee.
Crucified to set us free. Let's sing None But Jesus.
In the quiet, in the stillness, I know that you are God. In the secret.
Evening came. The crucifixion had taken place on Preparation Day, Friday, before the Jewish Sabbath began at sundown. Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the ruling council and a good and fair man who objected to the plans and actions of the council. He was a believer who was anxiously waiting for the kingdom of God, but he kept his faith secret for fear of the Jewish officials. Joseph went to Pilate and boldly asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate could not believe that Jesus was already dead, so he sent for the centurion, who confirmed it. Then Pilate gave Joseph permission to take the body. Nicodemus, who first came to Jesus under the cloak of darkness, brought over 100 pounds of myrrh and ointments for his burial, and together he and Joseph took Jesus' body, wrapped him in linens soaked in essential oils and spices, according to Jewish burial customs, and laid him in a new tomb that had been carved out of rock. Then they had a stone rolled over the opening to seal it. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, watching as the body was interred, sitting and remembering. They took note of where the tomb was and how his body had been prepared, then left to prepare spices and ointments for his proper burial.
It's a very, very powerful thought. God being silent but not absent throughout these events and throughout our lives. So often we feel like either God is present and therefore these sorts of things shouldn't happen, or that it must mean that God's disappeared or gotten distracted or wasn't around. But it takes us to a very different place to pause and consider what it means if God was actually present through all of these events. In some ways, it doesn't make it any easier to process. I'm always struck every year, including this year, by just how outrageous and staggering it is that Jesus went through everything that we have just heard. Betrayal, desertion, suffering, humiliation, pain, grief, anxiety, abandonment. But as we reflect on the devastation that's caused when evil and brokenness gets its way, whether that's through the experiences of Jesus or through the images that we've looked at or the events that are happening around the world or around the corner, it's important for us to wrestle whether that means that God is absent when God seems to be silent and things like this occur. And in considering this, we want to remind ourselves that we believe that Jesus shows us what God is like. That Jesus is God in human form. One of the names for Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. And that is crucial as we reflect on this idea of God being silent but not absent. Part of the power of everything that we've navigated through today is that Jesus experiences all of it. The worst that humanity can dish up, the worst that brokenness can do, the worst that suffering can cause, the worst that evil can achieve. Jesus doesn't sit up above it all like he somehow gets a leave pass or is immune to it, but he enters into it completely. It's interesting to note that it's not just God the Father who is silent through these events. As you may have recognised, multiple times Jesus had the opportunity to speak up, to lash out, to scream at the injustice, and yet so often he simply stayed quiet. He chose silence, but not absence. Jesus is present through all of these events so that he's able to say with no shadow of a doubt Whatever you have to go through, I understand. Jesus is able to be present to our suffering and our brokenness because he's been through all of it, and then some. Now, could God have found another way? I'm sure that's possible. But whenever I think about what that other way could have been, something ends up getting lost. Perhaps there are some ways that God could have achieved the same result. Us being forgiven, us being welcomed into God's family, us being given access to the kingdom and to life the way that it was created to be, us being set free once and for all. But without Jesus experiencing these events, something significant is missing. Without these events unfolding in this way, we would be unable to believe that God fully entered into our human existence. We would be unable to believe that God fully understands what it's like for us. It would be easy for us to say, as some of us have many times, God, you don't get it. Where are you in everything that I'm going through at the moment? But because of Jesus' experience, our perception of God can shift and change. Now, please don't hear me saying that the point of this is something like everything happens for a reason, or even God can bring good out of any situation. Those statements can often feel trite and inadequate, especially when we're going through our own seasons, when God does seem to be silent and we're questioning whether God is in fact absent. But is it possible that there are times when it is a sheer act of will for God to stay silent while being fully present, because everything in God wants to react, wants to step in, wants to intervene? Far from being ignorant or uncaring or dismissive, it must have caused God untold amounts of pain to be present to everything that was happening for Jesus and to allow it to unfold. And it must continue to break God's heart to be present to the suffering and brokenness in our world and in our lives without taking the reins and saying, that's it, I'm done, I'm going to step in. But that doesn't mean that God is absent. Far from it. Perhaps it's like a friend or a loved one who sits with us when we go through difficult times, when we're in hospital, when we're ill, when we're grieving, when we're struggling. And even though they may remain silent at times, their very presence with us brings comfort in a way that actually no words can. This is what we reflect on and take comfort and courage from today. That God is present with us, for us, among us, around us. We've spent the last 6 weeks exploring what prayer looks like, and for so many of us, a key discovery has been that prayer is about, as much as anything else, acknowledging and tuning into the reality that God is present with us. And today we have another opportunity to enter into prayer with that mindset. Whatever we're feeling today, whatever we're going through today, God is not absent. And though it may feel like God is silent, may we know the peace and the power of the presence of the one who comes to be one of us and experienced everything that we go through. We're going to have one final time of reflecting with a video song that's called Quiet. And I invite you in this to take some time to explore what it is that God might be saying to you in the silence today.
Here we go again, my mind racing, and I can't seem to win all these crazy thoughts and feelings. It's like it never ends until your voice breaks through my noise. And I know I'm not alone. I'm not alone. You will fight my battles if I will just be still. Why would I keep running when you're right here? I'll just be quiet trust you with my future, 'cause you're already there. I hear your voice, call me forward. I know I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Away with the distractions. I wanna hear what's true. The only words that matter, they come from you. So I'll just be quiet and let you speak through the silence. Here I am, no more hiding. You are in this moment, I won't fight it. I'll be quiet, I'll just be quiet and let you speak through the silence. Here I am, no more hiding. You are in this moment, I won't fight it. I'll be quiet, quiet. God, you're here in the silence. Here I am, no more hiding. You are in this moment, I won't fight it. I'll be quiet.
So as a way of being able to wrap things up and to take something with us into the rest of the weekend, we have the opportunity now to do a responsive activity. And so hopefully you've still got your rock that was on your chair when you came in, and there are some paint pens that are around the chapel at the ends of the aisles there. It's fascinating that Jesus made a comment less than a week ago as he rode into Jerusalem before all of these events unfolded about rocks. Jesus was being challenged about the ways in which people were responding to him and shouting praise to him, and said if the people were quiet, even the rocks would cry out in worship. And so we wanted to link all of this together. The reality of rocks, which basically are silent, but are definitely not absent, with the imagery that Jesus gives us of creation declaring how incredible he is. And so what we'd love you to do is to take one of the rocks and to write or draw something on the rock that symbolises what it means for God to be silent but not absent for you today. As we've spent this time reflecting, what is one thing that you want to take away? And can you capture that with a word or an image or an icon that you can draw on the rock? After you've finished decorating your rock, you can feel free to head down into the hall. We've got hot cross buns and our coffee orders are going to be taken from the hall today, so don't go out into the cafe. Head down to the hall and our orders will be taken there. And while you're eating and enjoying your hot cross bun and waiting for your coffee to come, I encourage you to share what you wrote or drew on your rock with one other person as a way of being able to talk about what it is that you're going to take into the rest of this weekend. And don't feel overwhelmed about that. It doesn't have to be anything super profound or massive, just one thing that you want to continue reflecting on. On Sunday, we'll be back in here at 10 o'clock to be able to celebrate at our Easter Sunday gathering that this is not the end of the story. There is still so much more for us to be able to process. But for now, when you take your rock, write or draw something on it, and then head out into the hall and grab a hot cross bun, have coffee, have a chat with somebody else. We would love to leave this as a quiet, reflective space, so once you're finished with your rock, please do head down there, and if you want to chat with people, also please head down there so that we can keep this space as a space to process. Thanks for joining us today.